What's up, everybody? Welcome to the weekend roundup. I know when Jesse Marsh got the Leeds job, the Ted Lasso comparisons were inevitable. They also made me want to throw up because trying to take the positive attitude and kind of the encouraging figure he is, of course, similar to Ted Lasso, and this idea that he's coming to the Premier League from the United States and try and paint this man as some kind of real life Ted Lasso was just utterly ridiculous. And as I pointed out in the column I wrote at the end of last season once Leeds were safe, at this point Jesse Marsh is half European. He came as soon as he could to Europe because he knew that was where he needed to be if he wanted to get to the level in the managerial world he wanted to get to and believed he could manage at. He's got no problem admitting that. I have no problem with him saying it. This isn't some random dude who walked into the Premier League. This is a guy who has played Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, PSG, and Manchester City in the Champions League before he took the Leeds job. Oh, and by the way, both games against PSG. Incredibly close. You could argue over 180 minutes. His Leipzig team, the one that didn't actually want to play his style, and he ended up leaving in large part because of that, and yes, the results weren't great too. Arguably, like I said, outplayed PSG. I was in the stadium when they went to Paris. They were the better team. They ended up losing, but they were 100% the better team on the day. The year before with Red Bull Salzburg, he gave Bayern Munich and Atletico Madrid all they could handle in the group stage. And he scored 3 times on Manchester City with that Leipzig team. Now, of course, they gave up a boatload of goals and lost. I say all this to say, anybody who expected Leeds to do anything other than go and press the living daylights out of Chelsea and simply outwork them, want it more, and believe they can force Chelsea into mistakes and completely disregard the talent level disadvantage on the field and the financial disadvantage on the field doesn't understand Jesse Marsh or is just not paying attention to his track record. Every time he gets into one of these situations where he is working against an elite team with a team that cannot play, player for player with them, he does the exact same thing, which is the exact same thing he does every single game. He does not change. He is going to sink or swim with his style of play. And the result in the past has been incredible performances that come up just short or occasionally result in a draw. I can't tell you how impressed I was with what he did with that Salzburg team. It opened my eyes to how good of a man manager he is to give that team that much confidence to go attack Bayern Munich and Atletico Madrid. But what happened in this game was he finally got both parts of the equation, because usually it's been one or the other. He got his team 100% bought into what he is trying to do and have enough talent to take advantage of the mistakes. Right, this isn't an Austrian Bundesliga team facing the best team in the Bundesliga. This is a okay to good Premier League team facing Chelsea. He finally has enough talent at his disposal where it works, they can beat anybody. And he got the other part of it, which was Chelsea were just awful. And so all of a sudden, it's a 3-0 win where all of the things you have always seen from Jesse Marsh teams took place in the same game. And the same things you have seen from Brendan Aronson and Tyler Adams. That first goal was patent Brendan Aronson. He just ran after the ball, didn't give up on the play, and ultimately got his first Premier League goal out of it, because when you have the ability, like Brendan Aronson does, to press for 90 minutes and not 45 and sort of lose momentum, which is going to be the question for this Leeds team moving forward, you are going to force teams into mistakes. I don't care who it is. And it's ironic this happened right after I gave my speech last week about how Edouard Mendy doesn't have a mistake in him the way David De Gea does, and there you go, he makes his mistake. And Tyler Adams was all over the place, just like he was when I watched Leipzig and PSG in Paris. It's hard to understand just how good he is when he is playing as that deep-lying midfielder when you don't see it in person. And the numbers tell part of the story, but some of it is just the incredible amount of ground he covers. And so you got all of it in one game. They did exactly what they were always going to do. And sometimes it ends up backfiring. Sometimes, especially in these kind of games, at least I have left applauding Jesse Marsch for the bravery, the boldness, the uncompromising belief in what he is doing, and believing if he can just close that talent gap a little bit, he's going to win some of these games. And that is exactly what happened, and Chelsea certainly played into their hands. Good for Brendan Aronson. Again, Tyler Adams, spectacular. And the final point I want to make here is one I'm probably going to keep coming back to all season. Because Jesse Marsch's path is so different than most American coaches, most guys coming out of MLS, we have to be able to separate him from Bob Bradley or the next person who gets a chance in the Premier League or whatever top European league. We also need to separate the fact that Brendan Aronson and Tyler Adams are playing for an American manager from who they are as players. Because ultimately, this is not a commentary on the state of soccer in the United States, as much as people want it to be. In a sense, of course it is, because we've never seen this before, and they are very much sort of carrying the flag, if you will, at this moment in time. But more than that, this is a commentary on Jesse Marsch's philosophy and proof of concept in what he believes in. It so happens, and I've said this before, that Brendan Aronson and Tyler Adams are U.S. internationals. But they're also, if you take away the international, sort of the nationality part of this, they are also players who, A, 100% fit the mold of exactly the kind of player Jesse Marsch wants, and B, have played with him before, so they are familiar and know exactly what he wants. They have the ability to execute it, and they know exactly what to do. Those players could be from any country. They happen to also be from the United States. But we can't lose that part of this when we're going to continue to have this conversation about Major League Soccer and the fact that these three guys are all currently thriving in the Premier League. Tyler Adams was a very good player for Leipzig. Brendan Aronson was going to end up at this level anyway. It all came together where they got to reunite with Jesse Marsch, and it's all working well so far. They've been fantastic. Again, I have questions about whether they can keep this up. But at the end of the day, this is proof of concept for Jesse Marsch. And it's the exact same thing he has been doing anytime he comes up against an elite club. Go back and look at his track record in the Champions League. I would just get real tired of having to have conversations about, can this guy manage in the Premier League? And can he handle being Marcelo Bielsa's replacement? Look at what he did in the Champions League, and not just the results, because the results don't really tell the story. I mean, yes, they were fine considering the circumstances. He finished about where he should have in those groups. But you have to go back and actually watch those games. Because what you saw was exactly what you saw from his Leeds team against Chelsea this weekend. It finally all came together for him, and instead of getting the noble sort of moral victory, he actually got the 3 points in a dominant performance because he, again, closed that talent gap a little bit with this Leeds team. and the financial backing he got in the summer. And he wasn't going up against good Chelsea. He got bad Chelsea. And, Kalidou Koulibaly gets sent off. Mendy makes the mistake on the Brendan Aronson press. I just don't want us overreacting and making this a complete commentary on the ability of U.S. internationals to manage and play in the Premier League. Because it's a set of circumstances that created this incredible situation we find ourselves in with Leeds and the amount of U.S. international representation. But all three of those guys have been successful on their own. They don't need each other to succeed. They all complement each other, which is why Jesse Marsch brought him back. And by the way, let's also go look at what else has happened with U.S. internationals over the weekend. Or this week. Josh Sargent got to play as number 9. What do you know? 3 goals in 2 games. Filling in for Teemu Pukki. Who knows how many more opportunities he gets? You'd like to think he's going to get a solid run of games here at the number 9 position. But that's also Teemu Pukki we're talking about. But Greg Berhalter has to watch that. And he's got some interesting decisions to make here coming up for this final window. Sargent's been out of the picture, and rightfully so. It's not working with him on the wing. And also, Greg Berhalter doesn't need wingers. Greg Berhalter needs somebody to play through the middle. But he got his opportunity, and he ran with it. And Jordan Pefok also had a goal and assist in a win over RB Leipzig for an Union Berlin team that's played very, very well so far early in the Bundesliga season. There are too many guys having success in Europe for Leeds to be some kind of barometer or needing that to work to prove U.S. internationals can cut it. We're there. And I understand there's kind of this inferiority complex, and it's great validation to see how successful this Leeds team has been. But I would love to see, from the U.S. standpoint, collectively, everyone get to a point where the validation isn't needed. There is enough confidence in the talent development and the production on the field that you don't need everything to go perfectly. You don't need Jesse Marsch to work to believe U.S. managers can be successful in Europe. You don't need Tyler Adams to be spectacular in the Premier League to believe the U.S. has guys who can play at the highest level. I get it. We're also just getting really close to the point where it's not a conversation anymore. And the people who are still asking this question of and being uncertain about U.S. players or U.S. managers are just not paying attention. And I want to be part of highlighting that aspect of it and pushing people to not be so lazy and not buy into stereotypes. And again, that has much more to do with the European side of it than the U.S. side. But this weekend was all over the place. Proof it just how incredible of a position the U.S. men's national team is heading into this World Cup. Greg Berhalter, if the next 3 months look like this, is going to have some really difficult decisions to make. And decisions I'm sure he will be happy to make, because it means he's got multiple guys in form to choose from. For example, the striker position. He's got these guys playing terrific for Leeds. Jesse Marsch was saying he thinks Tyler Adams is playing the best soccer of his career. Hard to argue with that. So let's just sort of keep this all in perspective. Don't need the validation. The validation is nice. But this weekend is another reminder. This is the reality of the U.S. men's national team now. These guys are going to be playing at the highest level, and they're going to perform well. We don't have to worry about their ability to handle it. And Jesse Marsch has been this good of a coach all along. He now finally has a team at his disposal to really highlight it and do things like dominate Chelsea. The other Premier League game I wanted to touch on here, perhaps the most dramatic of the weekend. Certainly the most interesting matchup. Manchester City, Newcastle ends in a draw. The main thing I want to talk about here is there is a blueprint for getting at Manchester City and Newcastle. To Eddie Howe's credit, another guy I've never understood why there were questions about him based on what he did at Bournemouth, but that's neither here nor there. They laid out the blueprint of how to get at Manchester City. If Pep is going to keep inverting his fullbacks, there is all kinds of space in transition out wide. Alan St. Maximin had a field day in the first half. And City just couldn't deal with them because Kyle Walker usually wasn't in that space. It was a center back who just couldn't deal with St. Maximin. And the other part of it is, and again, much easier said than done, but Newcastle did it for the first half. If you can get that space out wide and not turn the ball over, so you actually have spells of possession and you keep City out of transition, you can give them all kinds of trouble because that team is not set up to defend. That team is set up to defend through possession. And what Newcastle was able to do was hold on to the ball without letting Erling Haaland destroy him going the other way. And that's my big question for Manchester City this season is how effective, especially if the fullbacks keep getting inverted to make it even harder to get the ball off of them. How effective and how often can they get Erling Haaland on the counter? Because if that's a new weapon at their disposal, good luck. I don't see any way anybody is going to hang with them this season, especially the way things started for Liverpool. But if some of these other teams, Liverpool, even Brighton, Chelsea, Tottenham, if they can find a way to exploit that space wide and simply take care of the ball and have those spells for 5-10 minutes, right? You're not going to have the ball all the time. But rarely do you see a team do what Newcastle did and actually pin City in and not get hurt on the counter. Of course, this only lasted for a half, and then City were much better in the second half. They just held on to the ball and executed at a much higher level, and were much better also at getting Newcastle to turn the ball over. You can go watch the highlights back. That was what changed, is Newcastle didn't have those spells of possession where they pinned City in and actually made the fullbacks play defense because City's back line is vulnerable. The way they play defense is by having the ball in your possession for 75% of the game, and Newcastle was able to avoid that and fairly nearly won because of it. At the end, to me, this was a deserved draw for both teams. Newcastle just couldn't keep it going for 90 minutes. Losing Callum Wilson was certainly part of that. Haven't seen much on the extent of what appears to be a hamstring injury, but if he's out for a while, that's a huge deal because they don't have a replacement for him. At full strength, you saw what they could do. They went down a goal and still managed to dominate the first half. That is an incredible accomplishment and a testament to how good of a coach Eddie Howe is. And so we're 3 weeks into the season, and I am very much of the belief, if you're talking about the teams most likely to challenge the top six and to end up in those European spots, I'm sold for the most part on 5 of the big 6, of course the other one being Manchester United. A little bit shaky on Chelsea, but they're not finishing lower than 6th. So you're talking about, I think there's 2 legit openings somewhere in 5 to 7. And we're 3 weeks in, and there are 2 clear frontrunners. That is Newcastle and Brighton. Brighton have been spectacular. They just thoroughly outplayed Newcastle. They just went into London and beat West Ham. And so West Ham is the other team on their level from a squad standpoint. But West Ham is so far behind these two at this point that I don't see them catching up. I don't think Newcastle and Brighton are going to let them. Leicester's been a disaster. They're right down there in the relegation zone with West Ham. They're not catching them. Villa have been fairly disappointing. I have very little faith in Wolves. Just real quickly, you're running out of teams for those spots in what looked like at least 10 to 12 team race for those 7 spots. It's very quickly becoming something like 8, maybe 9 if somebody pulls it together. So that was my other big takeaway from this game for Newcastle. I know they didn't get all 3 points, but they have done this now against Manchester City. They won their other home game. They managed to get a draw in a game they had no business getting any points out of. They are in the driver's seat to get back into Europe. I still like Brighton more than them. They're going to have to prove to me they can produce performances consistently the way Brighton have. But also there's a chance that Brighton just stops scoring goals and it all kind of falls apart, because that's always a risk with that team and not having an elite goal scorer. But those two teams to me are two of the... Arsenal have been the standouts so far, but outside of them, the two teams I've been most impressed by, Newcastle and Brighton. I'm 75% convinced both of them are going to be in European competition next season. A couple other things I want to mention before we get out of here. PSG obliterated Lille. Kylian Mbappe scored basically from the kickoff. I believe it was the fastest goal in Ligue 1 history. And it just got worse from there. They need to prove it in the Champions League. But I am looking... This goes into my bigger philosophy. I'm looking for a reason to believe the result is going to be different. It's what I don't see at Manchester United right now. PSG are convincing me they are legit Champions League contenders. Of course, from a squad standpoint, they always are. But nobody's been picking them to win because of their history. They need to still actually get over that hurdle. But this is the benefits of having a Christophe Galtier in there. I was really curious to see how they were going to handle Lille, and they did just fine. Bayern also demolished Bochum. Nothing too shocking there. They do look really, really good. They're getting goals from all over the place. And then Dortmund had what is probably going to end up being the loss of the season. Up to, in the 88th minute, lost at home to Werder Bremen. It doesn't decide the Bundesliga, but now they have to get the better of Bayern Munich, because those are 3 points you had. There's going to be a game where things don't go well for them and they can't rescue all 3 points. It's going to happen a couple times. So that's already built in, and now you just threw 3 points out the window. Just a brutal loss early in the season when they were on track to be 9 points from 3 games and right there with Bayern. And then also Robert Lewandowski scored twice. Barcelona got a 4-1 win over Real Sociedad. Very good performance. Important to sort of get things going here and forget about what happened match day 1. Real Madrid also got a comfortable win this weekend. And Atleti got shut out by Villarreal, who have been perhaps the best team in La Liga these first couple weeks of the season. So we'll see if anybody can actually keep pace with Real Madrid in La Liga. But Barcelona, important 3 points to get their first win of the season. That's all we've got for you today on the Weekend Roundup. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, and also check out everything I've got going on on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com. And we'll see you next time.